Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, May 8th, 2018. The opening prayer will be given by the Reverend Kathleen Cunliffe of the First Congregational Church of Wallingford. Please rise.
Greetings, friends. I bring you greetings from the First Congregational Church. I'm Pastor Kathy Cunliffe, as Vinny shared, and I'm pleased to share in this moment with you on behalf of the members of my congregation, Vinny being one of those. In our founding, we were a Christian town, but today we share this beautiful place with people of many religious traditions and also those of no particular tradition. So in that spirit, hear these words of a prayer written together by one from the Christian tradition, the Jewish tradition, and the Muslim tradition. Eternal God, creator of the universe, there is no God but you. Great and wonderful are your works, and wondrous are your ways. Thank you for the many splendid diversity of your creation. Thank you for the many ways we affirm your presence and purpose, and the freedom to do so. Forgive us when we do not honor your creation, and forgive us in times when we are violent toward each other. We stand in awe and gratitude of your persistent love for each and all of your children, Christian, Jew, Muslim, and all those of other faiths as well. Grant to all, and especially our leaders, attributes of the strong, mutual respect in words and deed, restraint in the exercise of power, and the will for peace with justice for all. We offer our gratitude for this day and for our purpose in it. Eternal God, creator of the universe, there is no God but you. Amen.
We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Letourneau.
Here.
Marone.
Here.
Morgenstein.
Here.
Shortell.
Here.
Testa. Zandri.
Here.
Chairman Cervoni.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through HH. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. Duly noted. Shortell? One in opposition. The consent agenda passes. Item 4, items removed from the consent agenda. There are none. On to item 5, the public question and answer period. Mr. Chardullo.
Good evening, Paul Chardullo, 2 Bayberry Drive. Yesterday I had an opportunity to watch the last meeting that the council had last Thursday, and as a result I wanted to come down and express my appreciation as a tax-paying resident of Wallingford to Councilor Fishbein for the motion that he made to cancel out the tax increase, which I support. Also want to thank Mr. Letourneau and Jason Zandri for their yes votes. I really believe, and I kind of feel like, in a sense, that was a significant event, because the way I'm viewing it, right or wrong, is that we have an emerging leader in the Republican Party in Craig Fishbein. We all know he's also a representative at the state level, in direct opposition to the current leader of the Republican Party, which I view as the mayor. And they're directly opposed on the issue of taxation and the way that we're being managed as it relates to the cost of government and the resultant taxes to the taxpayer. Secondarily, Mr. Letourneau is obviously certainly has my respect. I think he's a respected counselor. I think he's probably the longest serving counselor on the council. And he also voted for that. And of course we have Jason Zandri, who's the emerging leader of the Democratic Party, who voted in favor of it. So I'm choosing to look at that as a sort of a convergence of thinking, and perhaps that is a good indication of where we're heading in this town, which I think we need to move in a different direction. Having said that, a little disappointed in the outcome of the vote, 6-3. My sense was, and again, just personal observation, my sense was I thought that there was going to be a 7-9 yes. Just watching, at least sitting in my living room watching my television, listening to the conversation about the previous item, I really felt like there was a consensus, a strong consensus, that we needed to work to eliminate this tax increase. And that's pretty much what I took away from it. Perhaps the proposal was a little too detailed. I think one of the things that we have a tendency to do is we spend a lot of time trying to identify, if we're proposing cuts, where all these cuts will go. And I'm not sure it's even necessary. I think the role of the council is to either approve the budget or not approve it. Because in the end, if you vote to eliminate a tax increase, the mayor, as he should, he will decide how to implement that change. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good to go into a lot of detail on where you think something should be cut, because everybody has different beliefs on what should be cut. So focus on the macro number. So that was one of the reasons I came down. The other reason was to once again express my lack of support, or my non-support, of the proposed tax increase. I think that once again this submission is an inflated budget. I don't think there's any question about it. I think everybody pretty much, my view is they're pretty much buying into it. If you look at have a little analysis sheet that was done by a friend, and it shows that although the average expense growth in Wallingford over the last 7 or 8 years is about 2.2%, the actual expense growth, this submission shows for this year and next, because it covers 2 years, this submission shows an increase of 6.8% being proposed. So even though we have a history of 2.2, we're coming in here with a proposal that's about 60% higher than history. And if you just look at the data, if you look in particular at general government, you can see where the inflation is. As an example, I just read some not going to go through all the detail, but the fire department, over that 2-year period, 29% increase. Civil preparedness is a very small number, 159%. Finance, 13.5% growth. Board of Appeals, 23.5%. This is a totally inaccurate budget. So I recommend, I'll leave you with my recommendation, which is to cancel the tax increase, make the cut in general government, because if you look at the distribution between the education budget and general government, you see where all of the excesses over history comes from general government. Even this particular 2-year period, The Board of Ed budget growth for that 2 years is 4.4%. General government is 10.9%. It's there, and I hope that before the night is out, that someone will make that proposal and the council will overwhelmingly support it. Good night.
Mr. Gross?
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. I just have a question for the council. Do you look at other towns' budgets? And the reason I ask that is, well, do you take a look at them before you look at your budget or after you look at your budget? See how they do theirs?
I'm not going to let you poll the council, but I
Okay.
will tell you that I certainly pay attention to what's going around in surrounding communities.
The only reason I ask is because if you look at some other communities, and I'm going by towns that are bunched in with Wallingford for like kind quality, and there's groups based on population, size of town, and you know what the towns they are. If you look at their budgets, they're less than Wallingford. And I think it behooves the town to start to look at that to see where they are having their cost savings or not as much taxation on the citizens than Wallingford is. And so I just hope that, and for next year's budget, because it's going to be, before you know it, it's going to be December again, unfortunately, and you're going to start the budget season again. And so if you start now and start taking a look at that to see where those savings are, maybe we won't have to have the budget increases that we have year after year. Thank you.
Anyone else for the public question and answer period? There being none, I close the public question and answer period, and I move on to item 6, which is to conduct a public hearing and consider an act on an ordinance appropriating $2,055,855 for planning, acquisition, and construction of various municipal capital improvements. I hereby convene the public hearing for the $2,055,855 appropriation and bond authorization for the 2018-2019 capital improvement program. The ordinance, which is the subject of this public hearing, is available to the public and may be obtained at this meeting from the town clerk. Is there a motion and a second to read the title of the proposed ordinance and to waive the reading of the remainder of the ordinance, incorporating its full text into the minutes of this meeting?
Yes, so moved.
Moved by Councilor Laffin. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard Marone first. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. An ordinance appropriating $2,055,855 for the planning, acquisition, and construction of various municipal capital improvements 2018-2019 and authorizing the issue of $2,055,855 in bonds of the town to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. Are there any comments from the public? Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road, broken record time. I know I've asked this before, but why do we go through this every year? And you don't have to answer it because we know it's a charade that we do it every year. But do the attorney sitting here, nothing against the attorney, but do we go out to bid on this or do we use the same attorney because he's been here for as many years as I can remember? And nothing wrong with that, but how much do we pay and do we go out to bid for this service?
Obviously, you do have a problem with it because you bring it up every year. We have requested, it was just approved for Attorney Fozzie to be, to have his fees waived for next fiscal year, which the council approved just a few minutes ago. His fees, frankly, I've forgotten off the top of my head. I could get back to you, but the last time I checked with Attorney Joe Fozzie, fees were well below most of his peers. I recommended Joe to continue for another year as he has for some 40 years now. He precedes William Dickinson here in, in Wallingford. and he has an intricate knowledge of the financial operations of the town. Frankly, he knows more than I do, I think I'd say. And of course, he could defend himself, he's here, but if he chooses to, but I'd like to say that if you try to get a Joe now to hire him as your bond attorney, you're probably not gonna be able to. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but he's very, very sought after, so.
I'm not.
That's my answer, Bob. I don't
No,
know. If
no,
you
it's
don't
worth-
like it, I really don't care, but
No,
that's my answer.
The question was, it wasn't on the attorney. I wasn't questioning that whatsoever, but it's the question of, at some point, you can't just have the same person sitting in a seat as you really don't want your auditors and so forth, sitting in the same seats year after year. You would like to see at least go out to bid, and you just said you started off by saying no pay for next year, no what? What'd you say in the beginning?
He was included in our bid waiver list, which was.
Oh, okay, all right, so, okay, I didn't hear it that way originally. So, yeah, so it's in the bid waivers. I mean, I know that a couple counselors have had issues with bid waivers, and I think when you have services, at some point, you really should go out to bid. And nothing with this attorney, and I don't know the man from, and that's not the point here. The point is, same with your auditors that do your books. There should be some kind of, where you've gotten bid waivers there too. You really should go out to bid and at some point change who these people are just for a different set of eyes. That's all. I'm not, and nothing with Attorney Fonzie. I didn't say that at all. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public on the proposed bonding ordinance? There being none, I call the public hearing closed. Is there a motion and a second that the proposed ordinance appropriating $2,055,855 for the 2018-19 capital improvement program and bond authorization be adopted?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Laffin, seconded by Councilor Letourneau. Comments from the council. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess to Mr. Bose, if I may, is there any intention as we sit here this evening to actually issue these bonds?
Probably not.
And is that the only reason why Mr. Attorney Fozzie is here?
Joe normally attends this meeting, that's correct.
Well, he didn't attend last year, but
I believe he had a conflict last year.
yeah. So the question was, is that the sole reason that the attorney is here tonight?
Yes.
And at what rate is he being compensated?
I'd have to get back to you on that, I don't know.
Okay, and I'm sure that the bills over the last 2 or 3 years would be discoverable under FOI that
Yes,
we've paid for the
course.
bonds that we don't.
Yeah, they're public documents, of course, yeah.
So I guess, the question, and I think we sort of talked about this last year, I'm sort of deja vuing, why is this on our agenda? Why can't we just deal with this at a future time? Is the debt service in the budget? Is that the reason why?
Okay, well, we, first of all, need authorization for these projects to be scrutinized by council, public. The second thing is, the bond ordinance is also a funding ordinance, in case we get grants that are state or federal grants that sometimes come down the pike later, as well as potentially, most of the revenues, of course, is from the electric division pilot program. And the third is so that these projects don't lapse. General funds, as you know, lapse. These funds, some of these projects may take, pardon me, 2 or more years to complete. And we don't have to keep going back and forth every year to get them reauthorized. That is until the projects are completed. They're authorized until they're completed. I don't know if Joe, if you want to add to any of those things, or just state your name for the record.
Joe Fazzi, Bond Counsel. The ordinance provides a backdrop for the funding of these projects, which typically come from the capital and non-recurring fund. So if for some reason there's a change in a priority, change in cost, or an emergency arises and projects have to be shifted, there's still funding for these projects to be taken, and there'll be no delay in those projects, either through the summer construction period or any construction delay damages, which might arise if a project is under construction and funds have to be shifted to perform some other project. So that's the intent of this ordinance. It's rarely utilized to be funded. It's just a backdrop to assist these projects that usually are paid out of the capital non-recurring fund.
And if I may, since Mr. Fozzi's at the microphone, Mr. Fozzi, when is since you predate the mayor, when is the last time that something like that needed to happen in your historical knowledge of this town?
It was a while ago.
About 20 years ago, is that true?
I don't know if it was 20, but it might have been 20. It was a long time ago.
Somewhere in that period.
So, okay, so thank you. So just taking it forward from what I heard, why we're doing this, this account doesn't lapse. This is one of the only accounts that does.
Capital Projects Fund, that's correct, it does not.
Okay, so what you said, what I thought you said was, in case we couldn't finish the project, and you mentioned lapsing, but this account does not lapse. The money, we have all the money because the electric division is paying it. It's going into the secured account. In fact, there's about $400,000 extra in this account from other stuff that previously done. So if somebody came in from the state for a grant or something like that and said, well, hey, where's the money? It's right there in the account, so there's no problem there. So once again, why would we be doing this?
Because there's a difference between the authorization to conduct these projects and get them going and the actual cash to fund them. Bonds would, or notes would fund the cash that would have to be spent for these projects if so necessary.
And what is that eventuality which hasn't occurred in upwards of 20 years?
We hope it.
The if.
We hope it doesn't happen.
What is that scenario? What does that look like?
What is that? I'm sorry.
We can't spend the money once we appropriate. The money is coming from the electric division. There's nothing that we can reasonably think of is going to stop that, right?
Correct. Other than a cash flow issue.
Well, they have $20 million in reserves, so I really don't.
Well, they have
think it's gonna
$20
be
million
cash.
in retained earnings. It's not all cash.
Okay. So, assuming that the money is going to come, we've earmarked that for certain projects. So, I heard, Attorney Fozzi said something about an alternative project, I believe, and let's just say the alternative project is that there's a flooding situation with the Quinnipiac River, insurance doesn't cover it, so we have to, come in and do some stuff. We wouldn't take that from cap and non-recurring. We would take it more than likely from contingency. That would be a catastrophic event that we really haven't seen. So,
Well, we might, but it does give us options. It gives everybody an option. It gives the 9 council members an option. It gives administration an option. Sure.
but at that point, because that's the only scenario I could think of, why would we not call up Attorney Fozzi, say, hey, we're thinking of doing some bonds for this. Why don't you come down for the meeting, instead of having him sit here for a meeting that we know, sitting here tonight, we are more than likely not going to issue these bonds. It just doesn't make sense to me. How is this good government?
Well, the projects, everything's approved. Well, if it's approved tonight, everything's approved. There's no necessary obligation to have the town clerk advertise another public hearing for a separate bond issue. There's no need to hold a public hearing if it should arise. There's no need to, because you're going to be paying for that if that all happens. And there's no need to expend funds, from a newly created fund, which is going to be authorized for bonds. And there's the cooling off period from a public hearing till the time when we would actually be legally able to perform the functions or to start the job. It's about a 21-day window under the repeal clause of the charter. So
And if this motion was to fail this evening, what would be the material detriment to the town? What would the town be unable to do?
the projects that you see listed in the 1819 column in the cap and non-recurring fund.
It's not true, because we have the funding. How would the town be precluded from doing the roads, expending the $2 million the electric division is giving us for these projects that have been appropriated? How? Since we have the cash, we have the identified projects,
Because the projects have not been approved.
but in approving the budget, absent the bonding ordinance, we would be approving the projects.
I don't believe so.
Why not? Since we've never bond, but because the fact is that that is the pattern that we've done every year. We've never issued the bonds except for a couple decades ago, and yet the projects have occurred. So how does that just doesn't logically jive in my mind.
I've got a question. This has worked and worked well for a long time. Why would we stop? We don't end up with questions about what can move forward and what can't. We don't end up with time delays because in 1 year we couldn't start projects because we didn't have the ordinance approved. We're on a very predictable trajectory of getting projects done. It works well. So what is it that causes us to want to change a pattern that's been successful? You know, a lot of government entities don't have patterns that show great success over long periods of time. Maybe they should start doing things the same way every year. I don't understand why we change something that's been successful.
So the question was, would we be able to complete the projects?
Well,
Mayor, you have the position that without this bonding ordinance, we cannot do the projects?
we would not have approved these projects because we approve it with a bond ordinance.
This doesn't make any sense. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Testa?
It's always been my understanding that the motions being made here, or the motion is twofold. One is, I always understood that we needed a spending ordinance, so to speak, to utilize those funds and go forward and approve the project. So this whole motion says an ordinance appropriating the money and authorizing the issue of bonds to meet said appropriation. So I've always understood it as this is a motion to authorize the appropriation of the money, and secondly, if necessary, getting the bonds. That's always been my understanding. That's why we do it, so we can do the projects and spend the money. Am I correct? Okay. I find it ironic that we're so concerned about the cost to Mr. Fazzi, and we've spent about 25 minutes of billable time talking about this.
Counselor Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at this in section 1, the breakdown of where the money's going, not the amounts per. We have a total sum, but we have no breakdown of senior center curbing or bridge safety rehabilitation projects. We have it just in a lump sum. But one of the line items, it's townwide sidewalk installation, replacement, and repair. Now, I couldn't find it, but I know when we were going over the budget, it was in somebody's budget.
It's page 84. It's in the cap and non-budget.
It's the cap and non, okay.
That's correct.
So tell me how that cap and non is tied into this, because the money's in cap and non now.
No, the money is not in cap and non now. It's in our request in 1819 as part of the town's 6-year capital plan. Infrastructure plan is basically what it comes down to. You folks tonight, as you do every second Tuesday of May, approve the projects that are in that column for the upcoming fiscal year. So in that column 1819, those are the projects that you are approving, and they add up to the $2,055,000 and change.
Which would be the approval of the budget. If we approve the budget,
Correct.
okay.
So then why do you need this?
So why wouldn't we why are we doing this before we approve the budget? Would it be the reverse?
No, I mean, the capital, the cap and non-recurring ordinance, once it's approved, allows us the flexibility to borrow if we needed to. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to take them in a different order, I don't think it would make a big difference, but, you know.
Okay, yeah, I'm hearing we've done this system for years and we should keep doing it because it's a success, and I have a problem with that. Just because we've done it for years doesn't make it good. And I think there might be another way of going about this that might be better. And I'm sorry I didn't get into this sooner, but it's our responsibility up here. A good portion of our responsibility is to see and understand where the dollars are going. And it just seems every year it's, what cup is the money on? It's getting harder and harder for us to find it. I think last year I was told it was, governmental accounting. Mm-hmm. I'm still having a hard time swallowing that one because numbers are numbers and accounting is accounting. And governmental accounting is I don't buy it. Okay, I'm going to let this go for now. I might come back to it. Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Councilor Morgenstein?
Yeah, thank you. So my first year not being in the audience, I have had the same thought processes from both sides of the aisle here. I'll go with Mr. Letourneau. Just because we've done it one way for all these years does not make it right. And being transparent with the people that we are being asked to tax greater, I'm appalled, as I always am, to hear that we have no intention of bonding. We should not be running a government the way we run our household, but big expenses should be handled in a manner that does not ask the people who in this state are having difficulty paying their bills to get their $140 or $147 of extra money out of their pocketbooks every single year. And thank you for your honesty that we're being so forthright that we have no intention of bonding, but the fact is that you pay for things that are going to be around for a good long while gradually. And yes, there's two separate issues here. There's approving the projects, they're good projects. There's the whole discussion of paying the attorney's fees, and yes, sorry to be taking up people's times, but I think it opens a vision into the way things are being done, and we as the council, as I've heard, want to be comfortable that we are approving money in a way that's responsible to our taxpayers. Thank you.
Councilor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bowes, quick question. So the ordinance that we're looking at here is this $2,055,855 because it reflects what's on page 83. And it was something that Councilor Letourneau just said, I understand that in this particular instance, if we didn't pass the budget, it would revert to the mayors and this would be a non-issue because we didn't make any changes. It's the same amount in both budgets. What would be occurring tonight if we had made a change? If we, as the council, had raised that line item on page 83 to, just to make it a round number, 2.5 million. That's what the ordinance would read here, right?
Correct.
So by taking that now, let's say that it passed, but then the budget didn't and it reverted to the mayor's, which was $2,055,000. Would we have to go back and correct that?
You'd have to find a funding source for the additional amount of approximately, in that theoretical that you said, about $450,000, which would be the only source that I can think of these projects right now would be your general fund, which would be the tax dollars, which we talked about last Thursday night, I believe, with regards to, under the ordinance that created the cap and non-recurring fund, the town can raise or can allocate 2 mills or raise 2 mills of taxes to cash fund, if you will, the cap and non-recurring projects. So you'd have to go and raise the tax rate about 1/10 of a mill. And then we'd infuse that into the cap and non-recurring fund if you wanted to raise or increase funds or increase projects in the cap and non-recurring fund, because there is no other revenue offset.
So given that example, if there was some sort of a change to that, do you think we should take this the other way around, or it's still okay to do it first?
I don't know. I don't see a problem with reversing it. I don't see a problem with the way we do it now.
I mean, tonight it's a non-issue. I'm just thinking that, in the future, if there was ever a change there, it would potentially cause an impact because the balances would be different.
We would have to change, that's right, you would have to change motion number 4 or 5, whichever motion it is.
Oh, while we're going through?
That's correct.
Okay. Good
Yes,
enough.
oh, definitely, we would have to, I apologize, I should have brought that all the way through to you. Yes, that, we'd have to change that,
Right.
amount as well.
No, I was just curious if that math changed there because, one budget didn't make it and the original one reverted, then we'd be dealing with that. But if there's a solution moving through, then.
Correct. The only other source of revenue would be if we wished to use some of those, the fund balance in the cap and non-recurring fund that has accumulated over the beginning of time through the end of, let's say, last fiscal year, which, as I alluded to, or I spoke to last Thursday, was about a little under $400,000. So if you found a project that you wanted to fund, let's say, for $200,000, we'd have to change both the public hearing amount and the budgeted amount for that $200,000, and also the amount for the revenue that's going to be utilized, and we'd call it use of fund balance. We have used some fund balance. Oh gosh, I'm going to say about 6 or 7 years ago, and give me some latitude if I'm off by a year, when we had about 497,000, if I remember correctly, in excess funds from the previous fiscal year that we had Henry McCully put in his listing of roads to be attempted and then budgeted in that upcoming fiscal year. So we used obviously the revenue from the pilot from the electric division as well as the use of the fund balance of about 490. For some strange reason, I got $497,000 in my head, but if I had to go back and look at it, I could find it about 7 or 8 years ago. So in other words, everything was still in balance, but the numbers were higher than the amount as then contributed by the electric pilot because we had some reserves.
Oh, okay.
Did that help, or did that hurt?
I think so. Suddenly, like I said, it's a non-issue this year. I was just looking at it like, what if those numbers were different? Would we have to go back and redo the ordinance because it's different? But it sounds like there's a solution going through in the motions.
Yeah.
So I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, Mr. Chairman, I just want to remind everyone, I'm sure you're aware, we do capital projects other than what's in cap and non. Cap and non is a particular program, but projects are approved by ordinance, such as purchasing property or will probably be, a project will be addressed. It's not in cap and non, and that's the improvements to the Spanish Community of Wallingford building. That will probably have to be a borrowing that funds that, and that's outside of cap and non. So how that gets funded becomes a whole appropriation issue by itself. So it's not as if the capital and non-recurring program defines all of our capital projects. It doesn't. And I'm a little puzzled as to why this generates such discussion when it's certainly had a long history of being approved and functioning, at least to my view, in a very respectable and uneventful manner in terms of things not being completed. But this doesn't define our whole capital program. without even mentioning all of the school projects that are funded outside of cap and non.
The basis for my question simply was if we were approving a number and it ended up being a different number, what was the course of action? Other than that, I wasn't necessarily questioning the process. I just wanted to understand if I voted one way on this and then went another way on the budget and that added up to a failure of our budget and a change, what would be the result? I just wanted to kind of clarify that. Thank you.
Noted. Councilor Fishbein?
So, Mr. Bose, you had mentioned the cap and non-recurring ordinance and something about that it authorizes borrowing. Did I hear that correctly?
That, the ordinance does authorize borrowing, yes.
Okay, do you recall what?
I believe it's called Ordinance 61, or
I'm looking at
1961 or something like that. It goes back about 50 years.
I'm looking at 46.
Ordinance number 46? Okay.
Yeah, and borrowing would be a source of funding, right?
Correct.
And I've reviewed the source of funding portion, and there's A through H. I don't see borrowing anywhere in there. But I think the area that we're talking about is parent E, that says an amount from the general fund of the town not to exceed the product of the electric division's electric energy sales expressed in megawatt hours for the most recently completed fiscal year multiplied by 3.14 per megawatt. A megawatt is equal to 1,000 kilowatt hours. So that, I think that's what we're dealing with here tonight in the cap and non-recurring.
That's correct, and I believe that ordinance was revised several times. I do have a history of it in my office. I can get it to you.
Well, I'm looking at the town app that we've paid for. So I would hope that this is the most up-to-date version. Otherwise, we're paying for a product that is out of date.
That's ordinance 48. There was other ordinances that surpassed that sort of revised or updated some of those figures as well.
Okay, well, until I see that differently. So I didn't see, so that provision doesn't say that we have to do an ordinance like we're doing here tonight. Why can't, I mean, the budget, the whole budget book reflects the money coming from the electric division. It reflects us taking that money and appropriating it to the cap and non-recurring budget. Why aren't we just adopting the budget as reflected in the book? So I know it's in the little book too. Why do we need to do this?
I don't know what you mean by the little book, but...
Well, the thin book. You know, the public gets the thin book, we get the big book.
Okay, yeah, but they're both the same, yeah. That's basically what happens. As you just read there, the funds are dispersed from the general fund, which is why we take the funds in from the electric division into the general fund and disperse them to the cap and non-recurring fund. And you see that in the general fund on both sides as a revenue and as an expenditure. So it's as far as the general fund goes, it's a total wash.
Understood. So, but what we're doing is we're taking and we're doing that transfer separate and apart from the entire budget. In the motion, the motion is two things. It's do this thing, take in the money and move it, and then issue these fantasy bonds, right? So looking at the first part, my question is, why do we need to do that through a separate ordinance when we're going to approve the rest of the budget as revenue and expenditures?
Because you're also going to be approving the cap and non-recurring fund, because that's the budget before you as well. You're correct in that you're budgeting in the general fund, the receipt and the disbursement, but you also have to appropriate the funds in the cap and non-recurring bookkeeping fund.
Which isn't reflected in the big budget.
It is. It's reflected as its own separate bookkeeping fund.
And is that a requirement of GAAP, or is?
No, that's our own charter. We can't authorize.
It's not in the charter.
I'm sorry?
It's certainly not in the charter.
No, well, the council is the only body that has the authority to authorize or appropriate funds. We can't do it, even if it's a bookkeeping fund that's sort of outside of the general fund.
Understood, but the question before this body is right now taking this one particular issue. You know, we don't say the same thing with motor vehicle tax income, right? Which is revenue coming into the town. The question is, why are we treating this revenue differently?
You're not.
We certainly are.
No, you're not. You're budgeting it in the general fund to comply with that charter, to disperse it back out.
But we're not going to have a motion before us to accept the revenue as projected by the mayor as a result of tax upon personal property, and then apportion that to XYZ accounts, or perhaps just to, expenditures in the lump. We aren't treating personal property taxes, which is revenue, the same as we are treating this revenue.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Because part of the first motion in the revenues contains the pilot from the electric division, so that's in that figure. The same thing when you get down to, I believe it's the second motion number 2, it's also in the expenditures which get transferred out to the cap and non-recurring fund. Now, let's just say those funds flowed there, okay, because you folks authorized it through the budget adoption process. Now, we also, as administration, we don't have authority to spend it unless you appropriate it in the cap and non-recurring fund as well. It doesn't really get spent out of the general fund. It gets collected in the general fund to comply with that provision of that ordinance, then gets sent to its own bookkeeping fund. And you folks also have to authorize the spending from that bookkeeping fund, which we refer to as the cap and non-recurring fund.
So you're saying that when we do the motion tonight having to do with revenue, that this revenue is included in that motion?
The pilot revenue that comes in.
That's a simple.
The pilot revenue that comes into the general fund, yes.
Okay. So
And the same thing in motion.
If that revenue income is going to be reflected in a subsequent motion tonight after this motion, why do we need to do this? Because Councilor Testa asked a question about,
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding the flow of your question, Councilman.
This question has to do with 2 things: revenue from the electric division,
Okay.
and possible issuance of bonds, correct?
And the authority to spend on those projects. As listed on page, I believe, 84.
Well, that's not in the motion. So the motion is very clear. An ordinance appropriating this amount for the planning, acquisition, and construction of various municipal capital improvements and authorizing the issuance of bonds. So it's the income and the
That's a
possible.
separate bond ordinance, that's correct. You're also going to be making an appropriation motion tonight to expend the funds from the cap and non-recurring fund.
Yeah, which is the utilization of the money.
Correct.
It's the expense side.
And also the recognition of those funds coming in from the electric division into the cap and non-recurring fund.
Yeah, understood. In a separate motion, separate and apart from the motions before us.
Okay? Yep.
Okay.
I agree. I'm having
So
a
we're
hard
gonna,
time following the flow of what you're trying to get out of me here.
well, maybe you're just as confused as I am. I mean,
Well, I'm confused by
this
your
motion
question.
is before us reflects the income from the electric division.
Yes, it does. That's correct.
And there's going to be another motion that reflects the income from the electric division.
Well, actually, that would be the income from the transfer in from the general fund
Okay, so it's not, it's from the electric division.
to the general fund, from the general fund to the cap and non-recurring fund.
Okay,
That's
so,
correct.
so the second motion would be not the
That's
same
correct.
thing.
All right,
It'd just
yes,
be another
okay.
transfer.
If that was our stumbling block, I
Yes.
agree with you. That's correct, yes.
Okay, that's where I got hung up.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're talking pretty close to the same thing.
Well, because okay. So the 2 motions, it's the same amount.
Yes.
They're being moved to do 2 different places with the subsequent motion.
Correct.
Okay. Understood. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Certainly. So we do this way to provide the security that these projects will occur.
Yes, there can be no changes to those projects that you see in the 1819 column unless we come forward to you, Mr. McCauley, or our town engineer, Baltramitis, comes before you and say, hey, look, we're running a little short on this project. We got a little bit we got a few thousand left in this project, we need you folks to make that transfer, and that would appear on a regular agenda. That's correct.
Okay. So the projects identified are townwide paving program, Bregman Park lights, senior center curbing, town buildings, general government security, townwide sidewalk installation, replacement and repair, sidewalks new, bridge safety rehabilitation projects townwide, guardrails townwide traffic signal replacement, and curbing replacement townwide. And the purpose of issuing a bonding ordinance at the same time as we pass the budget is to assure that one way or the other, these projects are funded.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you. Mr. Bose, maybe I'm missing something here, but we're going to approve an ordinance appropriating $2,055,855. In the book, it's not the same figure. That column is...
If you turn to the page just prior to that, you'll see a summary of the revenues and a summary of the expenditures. The expenditures call for a few $1,000s, $9,000 or $10,000, I've forgotten the amount, so pardon me, for some, what we call administrative costs. For example, legal costs, and as well as...
9,000.
How much was it?
9,000 for...
That's the difference, yeah. We allocate some of the accounting costs, some of the auditing costs, and some of the legal costs to the cap and non-recurring fund as a certain percentage.
Okay.
A very small amount, as you can see, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it just, when you were talking about the column...
Yeah.
For 1819, it just, we're two different figures, that's all.
No,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Anything else from the council? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
No.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
No.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
and Chairman Cervoni.
Yes. The ordinance passes.
Does.
On to item 7.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the total general fund revenue budget of $164,000,000, $790,681 per the change made to the mayor's proposed budget on the attached reconciliation detail sheet for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018.
Is there a second? All right, I'll second the motion. Discussion on the motion. I guess I'll begin. So we've spent the better part of the last month examining the mayor's budget as proposed. The council's been given the opportunity to question departments on their individual budgets, to question the mayor and the comptroller on what's been contained in the budget. After all was said and done, we had a motions meeting on Thursday night, and we took the opportunity to approve savings off of the mayor's proposed budget in the amount of $470,000. And while it's not the optimal decrease that would have prevented a tax increase, it does take advantage of savings that the council will lose if we do not adopt the budget as has been amended. If we do not adopt a budget as has been amended per our charter, the mayor's initially proposed budget is what goes into effect. And I can remember certainly one prior year in the last 2 years where that did occur. Anything from the public? Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. In the budget, are fireworks approved? Or is there funding for fireworks?
The fireworks are not in the budget. I have raised pledges for just over close to $31,000 that would cover privately fund the fireworks.
All right, and you said it that way. I didn't. You went on and enhanced the answer by saying you raised it. I just wish that the mayor would fund the fireworks. You have a $165 million budget that you're looking at. You're looking at a $30,000 expenditure, and it's nothing with you, Attorney Savoni. There's nothing with meaning that, but it's just for transparency and the appearance of, and nothing. I don't care which counselor did it, or even if the mayor got on the phone and did it, it's not the right thing to do. We should be funding those fireworks for $30,000 or whatever the amount is, and I hope that next year, that for that small pittance of money, that because we just spoke about the bonding of the bonds of $9,000 like it was just a nickel that was going down the road. So for 3 times that, we have the fireworks that most people in town enjoy, that we don't have to have counselors asking or somebody else asking for money like that. So I'd hope that would be in next year's budget. You know, I'm sure I'm talking on deaf ears, but let's hope that something changes. Steep grants, do we have any applied for, Mr. Mayor? Through the chair to the mayor, in this budget?
He's asking about steep grants.
I believe the state of Connecticut indicates there are not any steep grants, but that would appear, I believe, on the special revenue page, any grants that we're anticipating.
Okay, I don't have the budget, that's why I'm asking if they were, and because I understand the state is having a tough time, so I was just wondering if they were on there and we're anticipating any of those type of grants coming in this fiscal year.
Not, our information was that there are no more steep grants.
Okay, so, but there's nothing applied for. Thank you.
Mr. Chardullo.
Paul Chardullo, 2 Bayberry Drive. There's 2 specific recommendations I would like to make for you to consider in terms of reducing the expense budget so that you can offset the tax increase. One of them is the contingency account. If you look at it, we're budgeting $849,151. $849,151. If you look at the last 7 years, in terms of approved budgets, we've never used any money from the contingency fund. In fact, if you look at the budget book shows that for the year ending 6/30/17, we spent $196. I just double checked that with the audit. The original, the audit says we spent nothing. So either this is wrong or the audit is wrong. So I'm suggesting that you zero that account out. We already have a contingency fund. It's called the General Fund Surplus. We've got millions of dollars in there. If for some reason the town ends up being short in a particular department, I'm sure they'll try to resource share between departments. If they can't make the money up, they simply come to you and ask for the money. So that's one place you can save some money. The other thing is, I would recommend is to the capital non-recurring fund. I mentioned this last year also, and I'll mention it again, which is account 8035. I don't think that is let me be careful how I phrase this, a valid account in the sense that if you read through the book, it says that this is transferring money from the electric division into the cap non-recurring, or at least it implies that, and this authorizes spending that money. Well, the council let me restate. Money never flows from the electric fund, as Mr. Bose said, into the cap non-recurring fund. Everything flows into the general fund. So when we write down that we're transferring from the electric division fund into the cap non-recurring, that's erroneous. Everything goes, all revenues goes into the general fund. And the ordinance that we've been talking about permits the council to authorize a transfer of surplus money from the general fund into the cap non-recurring fund. So, my recommendation is to zero out that account because it will not have any impact. The money, you just won't be transferring money into the cap non-recurring fund. And if the town wants to, they can simply add to their bonding and, you know, make the necessary purchases that they want. I think what's been going on is that we've, as a result of our budgeting process, we end up with a lot of surplus money at the end of the year. It all goes into the general fund. And we end up funneling that money, the surplus, which keeps growing. Through this process, we transfer it into the cap non-recurring fund. And then we spend it. A lot of it, we pay cash, which is another process that I don't agree with, but apparently the town feels it's a good procedure. I don't think it is because it just drives up taxes even more. So between those two line items, you've got, you know, something like $3 million, close to $3 million. And I think that would cover the tax increase. So.
Anyone else? Any council discussion on the motion on the floor? Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very quick follow-up on that contingency account, just so I'm clear on it. There's actually two accounts, correct? There's 58820, which has, which I think is what is being referred to, but then there's another account, 58821, accrued expenses, which I think is for labor decisions that come down. I think they're different.
That's correct, yeah.
So the aggregate amount is 849,151 that's budgeted, but in fact, what we would consider truly the spare change account is the 340. It's the
As items come before you every meeting, that's correct.
Okay, and one more question on that. So in our budget books for account 58820, which is the general purpose account, the 320,000, for this budget year that we're in now, there was an original appropriation of 320,000, and then it was revised on January 31st of 2018 down to 76,190. Yep. And then in our March financial statement,
it's probably,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to, because of the way it was scanned, it won't stay the same way. Technology's, the mayor's right, technology's awful. Anyway, on that one, then it's saying that the revised budget is 13,050. So my question is, if that money was spent, why is it showing up as a revised budget? Or was it true, was it not spent? Where did it go?
That's a good question. The monies don't get spent out of contingency. The monies get transferred out of contingency to the line items, which will then bear the costs, and we charge for the cost that's before us. Okay. So for example, if you started with a contingency line item of $100,000, we'll just keep the numbers simple, and we need 10,000 for salt, we transfer it out of contingency to, let's say, Henry's salt line. You're gonna see, maybe I should have brought up salt.
Salt, yeah, we'll bring up salt to Councilman Ramon. Bad example.
I didn't mean, I just, something that we all can visualize. What you will then see is, you will see in the revised budget column If that's the only transfer, let's say we had to take out a contingency in the whole year, which of course is unrealistic, but that revised line item would then say $90,000. And Henry's line item, which let's say started with $200,000, would now say $210,000 authorized to spend. His budget would increase, the contingency availability would go down, decrease by 10,000.
Got it.
So there are no expenditures out of contingency, whether it's for that first line item, the general, or what we call the accrued. They get transferred into the line items, actually by council action, to pay for something that fell a little bit short in another line item in the general fund.
Thank you. Okay, one more question on the other one then, on 58821, the accrued expenses. So just an example of that. When we, and this occurred to me that night, but it didn't click till after. Like when Chief Wright presented the police budget, he did not have increases for salary because he said his bargaining units were out for, they were going to be up for their negotiations. So,
yes.
So that budget's actually going to be more. We just don't know what. We don't know what percent they're going to end up with. So would that come out of this?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilk.
I mean, and that would come before you folks when that.
As a transfer.
That's correct. When that agreement is reached or arbitrated and the calculation's done by Jim Hutt and myself, we normally do those.
Okay. Thank you.
And that total includes previous years. Often there's a previous year that involved time for the negotiations, arbitration, whatever. We have to make those payments from that back period, and that
okay.
builds up in that account.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Gross, I see you waving in the back. Well, you came up and asked a question on this motion. All right, you get one more. 3 minutes.
Quick question then. Bob Gross on Hill Road. Does the council have any idea where the budget stands through April in relation to possible surplus or to deficit at the end of the fiscal year? Because at this particular point in time, you can see historically of jobs that have been unfulfilled and so forth. Does the controller or the council aware of a possible surplus at this particular time?
Mr. Bose, I'm going to let you answer that. I mean, I know we got the March report recently.
Yeah, we have not, actually, we're still frankly closing March down a little bit, although we sent those reports sort of unclosed. So at this point, no. The answer is no.
No, that you have no idea which way you're trending? No idea on which way you're trending? Surplus, deficit?
You know, I'm just going to interrupt on this. We've been through this year after year. We do not do that. We don't estimate for the future. We don't project. The errors of what occurs with that can be seen at other levels of government. It's not a good way of budgeting. When we close books, then we know what it is. We have an audit. Otherwise, it's guesswork. We can expect money from the state in the last month of the fiscal year, June, and not receive it. We do not play those games, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what they are, games. We do not do that. We haven't in the past. We do not do it now. We haven't done it for this year.
In the past, though, take away the last couple of years, when the state said that you were getting a certain amount of money, you normally got that certain amount of money. This is a new phenomenon with the state that monies have been changed. But the controller and the Office of Finance has an idea of which way the money's going, because the way that it's been explained in the past, even though when you close the books in July or something after the June close, you still won't make an assessment of whether you have a surplus or a deficit at that particular point in time, even though your own departments are looking at the books until you have it audited. But you really have an idea of which way the money's going.
We do not.
That's sad then. Thank you.
Mr. Chardullo, there's only two people here.
Paul Chardullo, 2 Bayberry Drive. On that point, The mayor says he does not do that. He doesn't make those estimates. I would like to call out again the fact that the charter states specifically that he is to do that. And I will quote, and this is under duties of the mayor on the budget, must provide itemized estimates of expenditures for the last completed fiscal year, which we have, for the current fiscal year prior to the time of providing the estimates, and total expenditures as estimated for the current fiscal year. So if we are not doing that, we are not following the law as I understand it.
Just to respond, we do that. That's what you have, the estimates in the budget as far as what we're recommending for the budget upcoming, and we provide the actuals as far as we provide the estimates for the current year, we provide the estimates for the future year, we provide the actuals up to the given months in the current year.
Well, maybe I misunderstood, but I think you just contradicted yourself, but maybe I misunderstood you. Your response to Mr. Gross. The reason that that is important, obviously, is the mayor is the sole person in town, the only person who has the insight into all aspects of the town. And we need that expertise to accurately estimate how we're going to end the current fiscal year. And obviously, we've been grossly inaccurate on that. So there is a problem there.
I bring it back to the council. If there's nothing else from the council, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on this motion?
Thank you. Fishbein.
No.
Laffin.
Yes.
Excuse me. Letourneau.
No.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
No.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
No.
Zandri.
No.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes. The motion fails.
Motion fails.
Mr. Bose, our revenue budget did not pass. Is there any point to moving forward on the next motion?
Why not?
Okay.
It'll be an imbalanced budget. We can't adopt it, but we can't implement it. We can't enact a budget that's not balanced by state statute.
So the revenue budget has failed.
Correct.
So is there any point to adopt the expenditure budget if the revenue budget has failed?
Well, item 2 is the expenditure budget.
Correct.
Item 3 would be the mill rate for which that is built upon. The utility, you could do 4, 5, 6, 7, and, 8 and 9.
All right, so the proposed motions 2 and 3 are dependent upon 1, are they not?
Yes.
Okay, with 1 having failed, there's probably no point to moving motions 2 or 3. So on to proposed motion number 4.
I move to adopt the budgets of the divisions of the Department of Public Utilities for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018, as herein stated. The Electric Enterprise Fund totaling $78,547,646. Water Enterprise Fund. Am I totaling these right?
Why don't you just say as presented?
As presented, great, that's easier for me. As presented, and the Sewer Enterprise Fund as presented.
Is there a second? All right, I'll second it. Any discussion from the council? Comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Sure, sorry about that. Fishbein.
No.
Again, I apologize. Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
No.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
No.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to the next.
I move we adopt the budget of the Capital and Non-Recurring Expenditures Fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018, in the amount of $2,055,855 in revenues and $2,055,855 in expenditures.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion on the council? Comments from the public? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein.
No.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
No.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes, that motion passes.
Passes.
Next.
I move we approve the special funds of the Board of Education of the Town of Wallingford for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018, as attached hereto and made a part hereof.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Testa. Discussion on the council. Comments from the public. Ms. Tata.
Tata, North Farms Road. Does this include the 411 or 412 that the Board of Ed said that they did not need?
No, that would have been in the very first motion.
So that money and the $58,000 savings is
Gone.
currently off the table.
That's correct.
So basically this budget will now have, if it ends up being the mayor's budget, $475,000 from departments that they said they do not need.
That's correct.
About 470.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein.
Can I just, clarification?
Sure.
When did we make the reduction? Was it
Thursday night.
was it the Thursday night reduction, so that's locked in?
That's gone.
Okay, I just procedurally just wanted to understand. I, was here for the motion and,
If, in order for that motion to carry forward into savings, we would have had to have adopted the revenue budget, which was the first motion made by Councilor Lavin.
And the second one.
And the second one, which became pointless by failure of the first one.
okay, thank you. And I vote yes.
You vote yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Laffin, I'm sorry, I didn't ask you yet. Laffin. Laffin, I'm asking you now.
Okay.
Laffin.
Yeah, I'll vote for it.
Good. Letourneau.
No.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to the next.
I move to approve special funds of the Town of Wallingford General Government for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018, as attached hereto and made a part hereof.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Zandri seconded. Discussion on the motion. None from the council. Any from the public? All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
No.
excuse me?
No.
Thank you. Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next.
Move we approve capital appropriations and force reserve fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018, in the amount of $1,668,862 in revenues and $1,668,862 in expenditures. This represents the amount as of April 30th, 2018, which may decrease as expenditures occur through June 30th, 2018. This amount may also increase if the council approves any unspent Board of Education funds to be carried forward at fiscal year end.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Testa for the second. Discussion on the council? Comment from the public? Would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And the last.
I move we authorize the chairman to sign 3 copies of the finalized budget, 2 to be filed with the town clerk, and 1 to be placed on file in the Wallingford Public Library.
Is
Second.
there? Seconded by Councilor Fishbein. Any discussion? Comments from the public? Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. So does this mean when you finish this, are you done? Or,
Potentially.
and then do you have to come back to balance this at all? Or
There's no balancing. The mayor's budget,
the mayor's budget, that's what you're going to originally go with and that's what stands?
well, that's.
No, that's what you guys
it's
voted
not-
on.
I wouldn't choose your words. It's adopted by default. And
Right.
failure to adopt something different.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor.
I'm not sure about this last motion.
Well, I'm going to abstain. I'm just telling you right
It
now.
makes no sense to, there wasn't a budget adopted, so why sign anything?
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, what document will be signed? I mean, it's going to be...
Well, it would be your budget that ends up being adopted. Your proposed budget.
It's the finalized.
Finalized budget, yeah.
Operation of the charter.
All right. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
No.
ooh, Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
I abstain.
Motion passes anyway.
Yes, it does. If there,
Authorize you or to direct you? You abstain.
You don't have to.
it authorizes me.
You don't have to.
It authorizes me, but I'll do it. I've been authorized.
Great.
If there's no further discussion on the budget, then we will move on to item 8, which is an executive session. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Mayor, are there any items for sale, leasing, property discussion? No.
On to item 9.
I move we go into general executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes Sections 1-225F and Section 1-206B to discuss the matter of Stancuna versus Ovine.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of going into executive session signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council in executive session. Please kindly clear the council chambers. Thank you. I need a motion to come out of executive session.
I move we come out of executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of coming out of executive session, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council back in public session. We need a motion on number 10.
I move we authorize action in the matter of Stancuna versus Iovini as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, the motion passes. There being no further business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare this meeting adjourned.